everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the post-screening Q&A of Ruthless Souls. My name is Celeste Wong. I'm the Programming Associate with the Mill Valley Film Festival. And I'm so delighted to have three very special guests here today. We have Madison Thomas, who's the writer and director of Ruthless Souls. We have Justin Delorme, who's the composer and music supervisor. And we have Jordan Popowich, who was one of the directors of photography. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's just jump right in. I'd love to know, first, Madison, what inspired you to tell this story? What was the influence for wanting to get this project rolling?
For sure. So this was, I've actually always called Ruthless Souls kind of my problem child project. Just in terms of as a writer, I usually write on a very, very quick timeline. Like my next feature that I'm going to camera for in spring, I wrote in about 6 months. So I usually get through drafts very quickly. But with Ruthless, it was in some form of development or draft for about 8 years. It was one of the very first things I had developed as an early project as a very young filmmaker. And it always just kind of bumped up against problems, whether it was budget or a cast fell through or a big location fell through, and it just never really quite worked out. And then my producer, Darcy Waite, for this film, one of our producers, approached me. And in Canada, we have this program called the Talent to Watch program with Telefilm Canada. They're a government funding body, and so they had this program that was offering up a small budget to get a first or second feature done. So he was like, do you have anything that'll work? And I'm like, you know what, let's give this one more try. And so we kind of developed the current version of the project, specifically around the main cast that is actually in it. So Mary Galloway is Jackie, and then everyone else is kind of a local Winnipeg artist in their own mediums. So the film really looks at a lot of different types of storytelling, and not just in terms of its linear sense, but also in terms of how we share stories and how we share feelings and emotions. So we have a dancer, a songwriter, a metalwork artist, and a spoken word artist, and we kind of see their mediums throughout the film as we kind of explore the story of grief. But so yeah, this last draft kind of came about with knowing I had these 5 people at my disposal, and drafting the story really around them. So that was the cast that stuck, and then obviously getting to bring these wonderful collaborators on behind the camera, it all kind of came together. And Jordan can attest, having been on set, it just some days it felt like it was just going a little too right, and we kind of just were waiting for the catastrophe to happen, and it just kind of never did. So I think it was worth the 8 years in development for sure.
Wow. Yeah, and so Jordan and Justin, at what stage did you both get on board, and what was it that attracted you to the project? Let's start with you, Jordan.
Well, Madison and I kind of started talking about it like a few months before production had begun. And like I've been involved with Madison for the past like 8 years or so I'm always down to do whatever she wants me to. She's just a great thought-provoking director and artist. And really, like, I think she got Andrew and Tyler on board, and she kind of gave us different roles that kind of catered to how we are as cinematographers. So it was interesting to see Tyler work and how Andrew works, and just like their approach to cinematography and to their technical know-how and expertise. And I was kind of more in charge of like the throwback or the flashback scenes and the dream sequences. And whereas Andrew was in charge of like the webcam scenes. And it was just interesting to see like how she understood which one of us would be better suited to each separate kind of element in the movie. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I collaborated with all 3 guys beforehand on various other projects, shorts, documentaries. Jordan and I met on a awful little indie thriller when we were first starting out, and but we love working together. So it was great to bring those guys on.
Yeah, so it was always the intention to have 3 different directors of photography?
Yeah, I'd say like in the last couple drafts, those kind of 3 sections really made like sense as kind of separate aesthetic pieces, and I thought that would be a really interesting way to bring that to the forefront was not just having one single DOP differentiating these three parts, but actually getting three separate minds on it. Also, I'm greedy. I just want to work with all my DOPs all the time. So,
such a cool creative process. I mean, I'm curious, Jordan, like what that relationship was like with the other directors of photography, how you made sure, I mean, you all have brought your own style to it clearly, but it does work as this cohesive piece. So I'm curious how you pull that off.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I think there's like nothing but respect for all of us. Like, I think we each bring something different to the table, which is definitely why Madison hired the three of us, because I don't think she would have created a kind of weird environment in that way. But yeah, like, I think we just have different ways of thinking, and we're just different types of artists. So I think it was nice seeing all those elements come into play into the film. And the film is very much about people of different backgrounds and obviously orientation. So yeah, I think it was kind of important to have that behind the scenes as well. And I think that kind of came across in how the film's overall aesthetic, I think. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we had a lot of discussions about the aesthetic early on, just overall. So there was discussion beforehand just to make sure no one was conflicting with each other, so the scenes could cohesively flow together. And then we also leaned on color in post-production quite a bit to make sure that those transitions were smooth. But it was always like very much baked into the story to have these distinct sections. And also knowing that we'd have Justin on the tail end with music, and I always knew that sound and music would be not one of the only connecting forces throughout the entire linear or non-linear storytelling style.
Yeah, that's a perfect transition. Let's go to you, Justin. First, just tell us how you got involved and how you became interested in the project. But then, yeah, I'd love to hear about how you weaved the music through those sections so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so like Jordan, I've been working with Maddie for the last 8 to 10 years. We work together all the time, and yeah, it's just been amazing for just the entire time. I get a lot of support from Madison. I get a lot of like feedback, but at the same time, I get like a lot of freedom, which is just like the dream as a composer. So for this one, I think the process was just slightly different in the way that we started with Christy Tarano's music for the film and her character's music. So we did start with recording her music and just kind of establishing her sound and finding a way to make that like a separate but still like connected kind of genre to what I was going to do in the score later on. So, and at that point as well, I had been working with another artist, Zubi Eros in Toronto, and she's based in Montreal now. And she graciously offered a lot of her music to be played as like licensed tracks. So yeah, in terms of the score, I found a lot of different ways that I could maybe like I find that the story, even though it is taking place among like lots of different like lots of characters with different backgrounds and different like different styles of filmmaking, different ways to tell the story, I did find that it had a very like cohesive feel to me. So I found ways to accentuate that and to connect the stories. One of them is I have a central theme that you can hear in different ways throughout the movie. There's like arpeggiated like sequences. But my favorite part of this film, which like as a gear nerd, is I found a really sweet deal on like what's called a Roland Space Echo. And it's like a tape delay. So basically there's a bit of magnetic tape inside, and it will degrade the sound quality a lot more than like a digital delay. So what I did with that is I cranked it all the way up so that it would what is known as like self-oscillate. So it will just feedback forever. So for Jackie's character, a lot of the time I would sit there and watch how she was dealing with her issues, and whether or not she was in a, you know, in good spirits or maybe in a darker place. I found that sound really did connect all of her different highs and lows. And through Tony's character, we have different like vocal sounds that I would put in one speaker. I would have a male vocal sound that would reverse into a female vocal sound on another side. So just kind of like not like extreme sound design, but lots of different things to kind of help tell the story in like a subconscious way. So like tons and tons and tons and tons of fun for me. So hopefully it came across to folks who are listening.
Wow, that is fascinating. I understood most of those words, but it's incredible to hear that process. It's not a perspective we get often in these Q&As, frankly, so it's really cool to hear. Thank you.
Totally. And that's always been a big part of, like, I always say I get very cranky if I don't get to have Justin compose music for any of my work. For the most part, I get my way in that. That's usually one of my stipulations when someone's hiring me, is like, I got a composer that comes with me. Because I've worked with very few other people who just understand music on an emotional level. One thing I've always really appreciated about working with Justin is he gets into the psyche of characters and thinks how to bring that out in the music, versus I think some composers look at the image and are inspired just purely by that, which is beautiful. But I think when it comes from the character, it's another level of storytelling. Yeah,
absolutely. I know both you, Jordan and Justin, mentioned kind of tapping into that emotional connection with the film and utilizing that for your work. I think that's fascinating. And it sounds like you've all worked together for a long time. You're really close. That's safe to say, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's something that comes out in the film so much. You know, the three characters are lifelong friends. They're family for, you know, all intents and purposes. And I'm curious what it was like for each of you to build that intimacy and make sure, I think it comes across so honestly on film.
Well, thank you very much. And that's always been a very big goal of mine in any set I work on, is first and foremost, it's a healthy and safe and respectful environment. I think the best artistic work is done in those environments. I think the day and age of directors screaming at actors and crew needs to be done, because it's just not, it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't lead to great art. I think when people feel safe to be vulnerable, that's when you get those moments. And in terms of collaborating with people over and over again, there's again that safety. You know, I know I can leave Jordan with actors and he's going to be nothing but respectful and wonderful to them. And you know I can trust Justin with sensitive stories and he's going to give them the thought they deserve and those sorts of things. But in terms of actually like the actors and making sure that dynamic came across, because really Christy, Jeannie and Mary who play Jackie and Tay had worked together on another project, but Christy and Mary had never met before. So I think if you can, and this is sometimes hard with lower budget stuff, not even necessarily rehearsals, but just time together. We would just hang out and talk about the characters a lot and talk about their dynamics and maybe who they were as kids, just because those flashback scenes are a bit more abstract. So just giving a little bit more dimension that they could pull from. But like, honestly, just hanging out together, I think, is a very valuable thing in terms of any kind of artistic collaboration, when you know how someone communicates and talks. For example, Mary didn't know how to roll joints. So I made Christy teach her as like a bonding thing. And
wow.
So that was, they took their actor hats off and they were just, messing around with fake weed. So
that's really fun. That sounds like some good behind the scenes footage there.
Oh wait, there's some stuff sneaking around.
I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something else?
That's all I
got. Jordan, do you have anything to add about creating that intimacy? I know a lot of those flashback scenes especially are so raw and intimate. I'm curious how you approach that.
Yeah, the approach for that was still the same. I mean, we used kids that had never met before, but I think, you know, they were just such lovely people, little people. It wasn't hard to get them to kind of bond in such a short amount of time and to get them comfortable with each other and with us and just have fun. And yeah, I think that's, again, just going back to what Madison said, I think that's a big part of why she brings on the people that she does. And she collaborates with the people that she does is because these are good people. And I think when there is any kind of like friction or whatever disrespect on set, that comes across in the work. And so that's not okay. So yeah, that was a big part of why she selected the people that she did. And yeah, it was perfect, really. Honestly, everybody that we worked with was lovely. So yeah, I have nothing else to say about that.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so I want to go back to, we talked about Christie's songs that she brought to the film, and you know, this film is like, it's like a love letter to artists. I feel like there's, and you mentioned crafting the characters in the story based on the art that the actors brought in, Madison, and that's so interesting to me. I'm curious if there's a little bit more you can speak to about making that just such a thread in the film. And then even just the particular art pieces that were in it, those cool metal sculptures and the dancing and the spoken word, that'd be great.
For sure, for sure. So like I was saying before, like really, like every main character really brought their own thing to the project. We would have a lot of discussions beforehand, but the spoken word piece that the character Tony performs at the end of the film that kind of wraps up the third act, I knew that I wanted a spoken word piece in there, but I am a big believer as a director of just surround yourself with better, smarter, more talented people than you, and it will reflect really good on you. So I get a lot of credit for that poem. I think I wrote bullet points, and I was like, Liam, you're the spoken word artist, man. Have at this. What do you think Tony is going to bring to this? So he really brought it full force, and like he'll still like just drop it at parties. Like we'll be at a house party and he's like, want to hear Ruthless Souls poem? And he'll just break it down. So when you can harness, I think, that passion and that power, it's just going to set you up for really dynamic moments on screen because they're being their true authentic self. Same with Jeannie, who plays Tay. He is a trained professional dancer by nature, moving more towards acting nowadays, but that's the choreography. But again, another person like Justin who can go into a character's psyche and look at it empathetically. Jeannie talks at length about how Tay's dance style is different than Jeannie's dance style. He didn't just do his Jeannie choreography, he put a bit more weight and anger behind it because for Tay is an outlet. So yeah, just kind of harnessing those things. And in terms of Jackie's metal sculptures, those are not, Mary learned to solder and do some plier work and those sorts of things, but a bit of a harder thing to execute. However, I knew I wanted Jackie to have a bit of an obscure job just in terms of who she was, and we knew at a certain point in the draft that her apartment was going to be a character in itself, and so it was actually my art department head, Chad Giesbrecht, who brought the idea forward of it being metal sculptures. I think we were looking at clay and other forms like that. He's like, what if we use like weird grungy stuff? And we knew that we had this great art department assistant, Destiny Odway, who just jumped right in and just started making these weird creatures. And I think, like, did you get the knife mirror, Jordan, that you eventually wanted that was on the wall?
I didn't, unfortunately. I don't know what happened to it. But
well, we gotta get on Chad. So yeah, I mean, like, I think the sculptures and all those weird pieces have kind of made their way through the cast and crew. But again, that was just kind of letting an art department person just execute what they saw.
Nice. Yeah, it's so beautiful to me, the visual of just seeing the metal pieces that she works with, and they're kind of like discarded, rusty, like pieces of metal, you know, and just turning that into something so beautiful.
Yeah. You know, and I'm blanking on her name right now. We had a lovely review written really early in one of our screenings that the reviewer thought that she was kind of soldering these pieces back together like she was trying to do her life and her friendships and her relationships. It was like, it's not the prettiest molding. It's not the, you know, that the fine gold filling in the cracks, but it is holding it together, right? So.
I love that. I do want to go back to the Ruthless Souls spoken word poem that Liam wrote and delivered. Was that a scene that you shot, Jordan?
It was, yes. Yeah.
Okay. All the Tony scenes, I imagine, were yours?
Yes.
Oh.
All the flashbacks, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I just, that moment is such a beautiful encapsulation of, I think, the whole film and the flashbacks in general with Tony, I think, just do such a beautiful job of centering him, even though they're flashbacks and they're memories of Jackie's, but I think you all did such a beautiful job of making sure he was a full, well-rounded character, the hero of his own story. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if you could each talk about how I noticed the score for that scene is just builds so beautifully. It's shot in this very magical way. How did you make that the beautiful climactic moment that it was?
I guess I'll start just in terms of post-production. So the third act as it currently exists is drastically different than the script. We really played around, and we had that freedom throughout the whole film with the editing style, just it being non-linear. We could put flashbacks in different spots if we wanted, and we did play with that a lot, but the third act gave us so many options and so many ways to tell it. But I always knew the poem was the crux of it. So kind of placing it there, it was like, oh, it's the climax, though. I knew it was a very important part of the film, but I thought it might sit a little earlier or as the finale, but it was very much that rising crescendo. So I think once it got placed there, it was a very natural spot for cinematography. I mean, like, Jordan gave us all the pieces to make it that big of a moment, which he always does. But that kind of, where it was fell in the film, I think it called for that score.
Yeah, I think for me, like, if I had to choose my favorite part of the film, I think that's my favorite. Just as like a satisfying conclusion to all the sorts of themes that we were experimenting with throughout the film. It's kind of now all coming together, and in a like, hopefully it's not like a cliche way of just like, here's all the themes wrapped up in a bow, but I think it actually did kind of it crescendoed in a nice way that it wasn't necessarily obvious what we're going to do next. It wasn't the exact end of the film either. So when I did actually get to like the end of that scene, one thing that I wanted to do is create a bit of contrast, because there was like just a specific, and this is again maybe getting kind of nerdy into the music, but there's a specific key that I'm kind of playing in a lot of the time, but I never actually go to its its relative minor. So basically I am always in a certain kind of area, and then all of a sudden there's this like unexplored territory that we wait until the very end of the movie to actually go to. And I think that actually reflects like a lot of Jackie's character too. She hasn't really dealt with her problems like in a way until this very last moment. So musically it was so fun, because you have just like an opportunity to go big and an opportunity to go small, but in almost a harder hitting way. So it was a lot of fun for me, for sure.
Yeah, and I know Liam's mentioned to me a bunch of times, he's like, I want just the backing track of the poem, so when I do just perform it at parties, I can just play the soundtrack, because it just adds so much.
Oh, man. Well, I'd be happy to provide it.
Yeah. And as heavy as that moment is, like, it also feels very like liberating and freeing. So I didn't want it to cinematically to be too like stagnant or static. So yeah, I just wanted to keep a little bit of movement in there with just a small slider and a little bit of handheld as well. Like, it felt like it's an intimate moment, so I needed to be close to Liam to capture that. I wanted it to feel a little bit more alive and just really capture his energy as much as possible in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's really the first time throughout the whole film that we hear him talk at length. In these other flashbacks, they're more very emotional, poignant moments, but we don't actually hear the Tony character speak that much until this final thing where he not only gets to say his piece, but really gets to say his piece. So I think the approach that these guys both brought to that, it just elevated all of it. And obviously, you know, Liam just put so much into that poem that I think the delivery, those really authentic moments, they were just kind of, we could have captured them for days, eh, Jordan?
Oh yeah, totally. He gave us a lot to work with.
Totally.
Yeah.
And his first film role ever, so very, very proud of him.
Wow. Yeah. I think you really nailed it, Jordan, when you just said making it feel alive. I think like that's the word.
Yeah.
So I know we have to wrap up soon. I want to ask about, and you touched on this, Jordan, I love how you mentioned the diversity of characters on screen and also the diversity of the crew behind the camera and the diversity of, I guess, gaze or vision, however you want to put it, as well as voices. And I think a lot of people are going to see this film and see themselves represented in an authentic way, in a way that they don't get to very often. So I'm curious what the response has been like and what you see your role in all of that as.
Now more than ever, like within even just this past year, I think obviously there's been a big push to hear people of different voices and backgrounds, because there's no sense for anyone to feel silenced anymore. I think we have to like kind of wake up and realize this is the world that we live in, that like it has to be reflective of everyone, because there's, you know, there's no segregation anymore. Like we're all a part of this industry. We're all a part of this world. Like we have to understand one another and come to a place of harmony, I would hope. That is kind of the end goal. So yeah, like I think behind the camera and on screen, like we need to get a lot of these faces and these voices reflected. And like it's beautiful. Like there's no reason to not have that. And for a long time, it feels like people have been kind of stifling or kind of been pushed to the side. But I think it feels like a new day in a lot of ways. And I know there's always going to be like room to grow, and we're not going to get it right. And people will feel maybe that they're not accurately portrayed and reflected. But I think when you bring people on that have the best intentions and that are willing to listen and to hear other people's perspective, I think that's when you can have like an honest portrayal and reflection of all these different groups on screen.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I mean, it's not as easy for music to reflect that, and especially in a scored context. But for sure, from my perspective, anyway, it's yeah, like you said, like honesty, I think is number one. And whether it comes to like representation and achieving diversity, like within the score itself, or at least the soundtrack, like Zubi Eros's music is reflective of her experiences, like growing up in her community, and very much like a lot of the songs that are being listened to on the vinyl record player and on a CD player are kind of dealing with that in a way that you might not know up front, but once you do maybe delve it a little bit into the lyrics and into what the characters are feeling, I think it does reflect an honesty. So yeah, for me as like a watcher of films, a fan of films, seeing the change like slowly and gradually to something better than to just, you know, whitewashed Hollywood kind of movies. It's definitely going in the right direction. But yeah, I'd like to for sure be part of, you know, the movement towards like true diversity and equitable filmmaking, and making sure everyone is as safe as possible and supported as possible, so that we can all like make honest stories without having to worry about, you know, different, you know, dramatic, like unfortunate things that we are currently still fighting a lot. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and like Justin was saying, that the support and the feeling safe, I think that just comes so much more naturally and so much more organically and so much more innately when an actor, especially as a BIPOC actor, or someone who is a minority, is especially as an actor, you know, it's a very vulnerable position you're in. You don't necessarily have actually a ton of power, but if that person can look at the crew and see other people who look like them, and they know they're going to have their back, and they know they're not going to be the only voice there, it's incredibly empowering, and it allows them to ask questions, question things when something doesn't feel right, because they know someone else on that crew is going to have their back. So as a producer, as a director, when I have that option and I'm allowed to give that voice, you know, I want my floors to look like the world that's around us, which is diverse and which is varied.
Well, I think that's a great place to end this. Thank you all so much for joining this conversation. I'm so thrilled you could make it. And thank you all at home for watching. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Mill Valley Film Festival.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, everyone. Miigwech from Canada.